Live from London, it's Plank of the Week with Mike Graham.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week. It's Friday night on TalkTV and this is the only place to be because we will do all the judging that you need to be done of all of the people that have done ridiculously plankish things this week. And not only has there been plankery this week, there's been a lot of bankery as well. I'm delighted to say I've got a fantastic panel to help us out. We've got Dr. Renee Hoenderkamp in case you're feeling unwell. We've got Will Geddes just in case you need some security. We've got Laura Dodsworth in case you need a book written. Free Your Mind is out now, the new book. And Allan just in case anything goes wrong because he's very good at fixing almost everything. I'm delighted to say that this is, of course, the plank that will be given to the winner. And we actually gave it to Coutts Bank last week, and I'm wondering whether, for the first time in a while, we might have a bit of a double on the go. We shall see. But let's start with Will Geddes. You've got our old favourites for us.
Oh, yes, Michael. It seems that every single time I come on this show, they are always going to be my first nomination, and I think they may be for some time. You may get bored of inviting me because you'll know who I'm going to nominate. So it's our dear friends at Just Stop Oil.
Well, they do keep making the news, don't they?
Well, they do, and certainly, especially that the figures have now started coming out more and more in terms of the costs that it's actually incurring on us, meek and mild taxpayers. And the Metropolitan Police have released that it's cost them £7.7 million for the last 13 weeks to police these various protests.
Now, you're in security, right? Why does it cost so much money? They don't seem to do much, the police. In fact, a lot of the demos that were on this past week, I haven't seen police even on them.
Well, I think we've got to feel a bit sorry for the police because the police can only work within the confines of the British law as it's currently set out. And I had hoped that when King Charles came in, obviously for his coronation, and they'd made some adjustments, that would liberate, obviously, the Metropolitan Police to disturb this. But what we've now seen
is... locked up the Republicans, though, didn't they?
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they did then.
I think, really, what we want to see is, you've been forecasting, I think we've all been forecasting, that there's going to be a turn. There's going to be a nasty turn in the dynamic. And we're seeing more and more assaults on these protesters, which I think, to a certain extent, in normal cases, would garnish respect or sympathy from, not respect, sympathy from the general public. But people are so incensed by their complete lack of consideration for anybody, ruining sports events, stopping people being able to get to hospitals, to schools, people on their holidays, that I think people are just like, we're fed up. And now this new stop peeing people off counter group that's come out, I mean, their inspired little demonstration with the balloons and rape alarms at their little banquet in the church was just genius.
I think we've got a little clip of that. Let's have a look at it.
The day had arrived, with hundreds of JSO members solving climate change by hosting a party, except one of their members was the mole.
So those are the rape alarms going off.
Love
Just Stop Oil pretended they didn't mind, didn't they?
Yeah, of course.
They clearly did mind.
Absolutely. The worst thing they could have done was to protest and show and illustrate that they were fed up with it. I think we're going to see more of that. I think we're going to see more groups contesting.
Well, we saw the other group, didn't we, who sort of kettled them.
Yes, exactly.
That was Just Stop Peeing everyone off as well.
Same group.
Those moles, one of the best things they uncovered, I mean, I think they're very funny. This is all very British, isn't it? We've got our British protesters and then our counter-protesters, all done with jolly good humour, all having a laugh at it. But one of the best things they found was that Just Stop Oil go to Pret and they have their coffee flown around the world in their single-use cups.
Oh, yeah.
It's just the blatant, gross hypocrisy.
Well, I think it is that, isn't it? And actually, it's first of all people telling us what we should do. They can live their lives however they want. But every time I see these now, all I think is it's a cult.
Yeah,
it's a cult. They're getting more and more frenzied. And at some point, they will just go poof and it'll all be over.
I mean, I think as a countermeasure, I think one of the things that I would want to do if I was financed, and we could easily do it, is to do extensive background checks on everybody connected to Just Stop Oil and look at the hypocrisy that is attached to many of their protests and probably about their holidays.
Well, many of them have got very wealthy parents, haven't they? There was that guy who did the... I think was it the cricketing protester. His dad is like a hedge fund manager or something. He lives in this big house in Hampstead. They've all got plenty of cars and plenty of foreign holidays. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's right. And the other problem is that it actually reflects a much bigger problem in the establishment and the people that are running things because they have a lot of sympathy with these ideas. And that's
sometimes
the problem
the police as well.
And that's the problem with the training college at Hendon and the policing. And Yet at the same time, more laws are being made all the time for the rest of us that make things even more controlled. So it's a double whammy. And really what needs to happen is we need to have a commitment to upholding the laws that currently exist to deal with them. And so you wouldn't get this situation where the public is actually quite heroic moving them along, actually getting them out of the way because people are frustrated.
Yeah, people are fed up. And also, there's this new breed, isn't there, of Just Stop Oil activists. You know, they're not just students anymore. They're grannies. Have a look at this.
I went onto the road and was arrested straight away without any warning. Constable Wilson arrested me after about half a dozen steps on the road. And I've got my grandson coming tonight. He's staying for the next 2 nights with Grandma and Grandad. And he told me when I saw him last week, the first thing he said to me was, Grandma, the fish in the pond are dying. He's 5. The fish in the pond are dying because it's too hot for them and they can't breathe. And I'm doing this for him.
I think Grandma's a bit nutty.
Grandma's
and I think the fish
it was
has
very
died.
funny. A lot of people were tweeting that after underneath that, saying Grandad's really happy that she's been arrested.
Yeah, I
She's not
bet.
be back for a while.
Yeah.
You know,
I think Grandad's probably been fishing the fish out himself.
Did she not also say, we've cut it off a bit early there, she also said, he's going to be on his own. Oh, well, Grandad's going to be there, you know. And you're going, what's wrong with you,
There's 2 things
woman?
about this. Firstly, I've got a very big pond with some very big fish, and they're all alive and well, I can tell you. And none of them have died.
Not been complaining about the heat?
No, not been. And you know
good.
why? Because they've got a pump and there's plenty of oxygen in there, and that's it. But secondly...
Also, we're not living in Saudi Arabia.
We're not. No. But also, secondly, why is the policewoman standing there allowing this woman to give a TV interview while she sobs? Why is she not in the back of a police car? If she was in France, she would not be giving that interview.
No, she'd be face down in the back of the police car. Right, you're next with
I'm next.
SADIQ. Go on.
OK, so today I'm coming out for a change in defence of men.
Yes, thank God.
Because I am very, very worried, as you know, about our girls and our women, but I'm also equally worried about our men. And SADIQ Khan has just pushed me over the edge this week. So he's got this new campaign that apparently is going to stamp out sexism. What it's going to do is men are going to be too scared to ever speak to each other or a woman again. So essentially, the idea is, Mike, that you're having a few beers with your mates on the sofa and someone says something as cheeky as, oh, I could really do with a spicy breast right now. And your friends are horrified.
That's in the ad.
That's in the ad.
You're kidding me.
Your friends are going to be so horrified, they're going to go, mate.
Mate. Well, there's a poster, isn't there? Let's have a look at that. And apparently, mate is how you tell people not to do something.
Really?
Yeah, so apparently it's been very carefully thought through this, and I'm sure Laura will tell us more about this later, so I'm not going to steal that from her, about how it affects our psychology. For me, the big issue here is that we are trying to stop all human interaction. Who decides what is and isn't acceptable? How do teenage boys ever pluck up the courage now to ask a girl out, to tell her she looks nice? I'm not saying that women deserve to be sexually harassed or raped or attacked. This isn't going to stop any of that.
No, but this is the madness of the left, isn't it? That, you know, there is for them no nuance. It's either don't speak to anybody or, you know, attempt to sort of sexually assault them. I don't seem to have anywhere in between. All these signs on the underground, you know, don't touch people who don't want to be touched. Oh, I already know that. You can't go up touching people on the underground.
You know, they don't like us being men and women. You know, I've got teenage boys. Let me tell you, if they were just talking about spicy breasts, I'd be surprised. You know, this is not how they talk. But something that was really unpleasant about that ad was they make the culprit, the sexist culprit, white working class boys. So it always falls to the white working class boy to be demonised. I don't like that. But yes, they do use behavioural science principles. It was developed by Ogilvy, who've got a big behavioural science arm, and they use conformity. So they're trying to get across this idea that, you know, you've all got to be the same and have a go at the scapegoat. And also they're using efficacy. They're giving you something to do. So if you don't like what you see, here's the action. You go, mate. But then, do you know why they've made it like that? Mate. Not just mate. Because they said that the elongated vowel gets your attention and the T snaps you to at the end. It's a bit like Barbara Woodhouse used to teach dogs to sit. And so
also, it's a very London-based thing, isn't it? Because
like
people might speak like that. You know,
Yeah.
you can see the guys that they're aiming it at, you know, who go to Romesh Ragnam-Mathan's, you know, comedy show, which isn't comedy at all, and all sit there going, oh, we better not laugh at anything that might be off colour, you know, and then there isn't anything funny to laugh at anyway. So they kind of laugh nervously when he goes, mate, you stop being a sexist. It's ridiculous. Total madness.
I'm really scared.
But up in Manchester, they don't talk like that. So you're going to say, mate. Or what are they going to say in Wales, mate? Northern Ireland, mate.
But Mike, we've got to a point now where men are ashamed of being men.
Yeah,
we're telling them all the time that they
have working on
toxic masculinity.
Yeah.
There's a movie out this week called Barbie where all of the men are unemployed, all of the women are really capable, and we're giving the message that we don't need men. And I can't help extrapolate that into, well, if you're so useless as a man, why not be a woman?
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, why not? Then you can go anywhere you like.
Yeah. I have to say, I mean, it's...
Blimey.
Well, I think the lack of intelligence that's applied to it is the fact that men have a filter. And what we say to our fellow male counterparts may be entirely unbroadcastable in the same way as we would say things in our own homes with our friends that we would never say that we were, on air, for example, right now. Yeah. There's a filter, and guys have got to allow to explore what is appropriate, what's inappropriate, and ultimately, yes, there's a certain degree of support from your good friends, but then probably going to ignore it completely.
But there's also a thing about the encroachment in our most intimate relationships, you see, because the thing is, if you try and reprogram the etiquette of how people conduct themselves, the whole idea of exercising your own judgment, your own moral web, all of the things that are so important about consciousness and who we are and how we define ourselves gets eradicated for this kind of absolute universal standard that they impose as though somehow we can't make decisions.
Exactly.
I don't have a
telling
moral
people,
web, I think.
It's telling people to police each other. And I don't like that. You know what? Don't spend money on a completely
It's our money, by the way, spending.
Exactly. So it's a cringy ad telling people to police each other. Why don't you instead use that in the police to stop Just Stop All, or perhaps address misogyny in the police?
We're going to move on in a second, but I suggested, why don't you take it down to the Regent's Park Mosque and walk in with it and go, mate, why have you got all those women over there? Why haven't you got them in here with you?
When you won't do that. When I came up the tube today, the entire tube adverts up the long escalator at London Bridge says be kind.
Yeah.
Our money has paid for that. Frankly, Mike, if you don't know how to be kind, you're not going to be kind because you read it up the escalator.
It's true.
I think myself quite kind, but those ads make me feel quite annoyed. I am kind.
It actually made me feel violent.
You're a woman.
It makes me feel like saying something not very kind at all when I see those posters.
Listen, it's Alan's turn now. So what you got for us, Alan?
So I think the plank should be the Guardian.
Well, that's always a good one for me.
This week, it's been quite incredible seeing the announcements they've been making. One in particular where they said it's now undeniable that the heat waves are as a consequence of what we're doing with global warming. And so basically they're saying a number of different things. One, it's undeniable that scientists have said it, so you're not allowed to contest or question or ask any questions. It makes you a denier. They're making that analogy with Holocaust denial, right? It's very, very insidious. Science predicated on, obviously, critical engagement, discussion, thought. It's also interesting to note that the scientists that they talk about, see, this generic scientists, as though all the scientific community...
All scientists are very clever people.
...has all agreed on this, and there is no consensus. It's a particular group that based, surprise, surprise, on modelling. Yeah. So it's based on models of what things might look like in the future based on a number of different variables.
I think we've got the front page. We can have a look at it here. Because you're right, they've sort of gone doolally on it this week, haven't they? Because it's hot in Europe. All of a sudden, we must now bring these two ideas together and make one correlate to the other.
It is shocking, and it is at the same time that we've seen that the Behavioural Insights team have done collaborations with people like Sky and also the BBC, and that the Nudge Unit has been very involved in this idea of weather. So weather's becoming more like propaganda around the idea of net zero and thou shalt not do things. At the same time, we've seen, interestingly, that the fire departments in Rhodes and in Corfu have said much of this, the fires currently are to do with human-made things, whether it's arson purposely or unintentionally. So you've got this big proclamation that's not really doing anything with diligence and journalistic standards, at the same time not even reporting things that have been done on the ground there. So it's quite shocking.
Misreporting things as well, because they're deliberately making
this is why
there are hotter temperatures out there than there really are. And there's several reasons why it could be happening. They could be measuring different parts of, the country, for example. I mean, the BBC had, and we'll talk about the BBC later, but the BBC had a temperature gauge for countries last week. France, 40. Well, it's not 40 in France, is it? It's 40 maybe in bits of France, but it probably isn't, because I couldn't find anywhere in France that was actually 40. But, you're not going to tell me that the temperature in Calais is the same as the temperature in Cannes. Yeah. Because it isn't. So how can you go 40? Unless you're doing an average, in which case some places must be hotter than 40, but they weren't. So it's crazy, isn't it?
But I thought it was really interesting how we had all of this, I said to Laura, all of this all week, telling us how bad it was burning, and then boom, yesterday, Sky landed with a news flash. Is this now the time to recalibrate how we go on holiday and where we go on holiday? And it's like it's just all coming together in fear, 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 fear. Here's what you do.
I mean, I like your underlying point, which is about The Guardian not presenting. I think this is why most people are turning away from MSM, and they're not feeling confident in the messages that are being delivered. And the fact that the Guardian is not presenting an opinion piece, it is a definitive piece. This is, like you say, it's undeniable, and if you think anything different, you're a denier.
It's not news at all.
No.
It's really not.
So we have these terms like Cerberus, and we have these bright colours, and we have this propaganda effectively, and what then happens is it breaks down trust. People then become more cynical about all news, which is a problem.
Or not, if it's all as unreliable.
Well, I think the thing is that it's tricky because there is a breakdown of trust generally, and I think that's a problem. And the other thing is, I think that though there is a pushback, and a lot of people are saying, actually, we're not going to buy into it, but then again, some do. So I think that constant drive to make us do things and behave in a certain way is really, really pernicious.
It is, it absolutely is. But we've got to move on because we've got a lot to talk about.
Only there was a new book out about all the things. Only.
But luckily for you, Laura, it's your turn, so you can perhaps give it a plug.
Yeah, not Bank of the Week, Plank of the Week for Dame Alison Rose, CEO of NatWest. The reason that I'm putting her forward, and I would urge you to consider her for Plank of the Week,
definitely,
is that I think she really emblemizes a very insidious erosion of true ethical principles.
Yeah.
So Coutts produced this noxious, bizarre report into Nigel Farage. Dossier, where he's criticised all the way through, OK? So they don't like him. They don't like his values. It couldn't be clearer.
They might as well have just said that. We don't like Nigel Farage. That's why we've shut his bank account.
Because they said banks have values. This isn't true. Banks are just businesses where you store your money. People have values. But what she did, and she's admitted it now, is she had a chat with the BBC, and she told the BBC that he'd been debanked because he didn't meet the wealth threshold. That's not true.
That's what we used to call
That's not what's really going on.
A lie.
It's a lie.
Yeah.
And so you've got this report which clearly places itself on a vantage of total moral superiority while she's behaving completely immorally. She's conspiring behind the scenes. She's trying to smear him. She's lying. She's not telling the truth. And if the CEO of a bank doesn't know how to protect customer confidentiality and thinks they have the right to withdraw someone's bank because they don't like their values, we're in a really bad place.
Well, let's not forget as well the process that went on here, where NatWest had a series of announcements that they could have done in a different way. When she first came out and said that she was sorry about the report, she basically didn't admit that she was the source of the story to the BBC, and she also said that the views of this committee, which is the Wealth and Social Risk Committee or something, Revenue Risk Committee, said it wasn't the values of the bank, didn't represent her views. She set the committee up, and it was her order that they should look into it. But she didn't say any of that. But let's have a look at Nigel Farage, because he's obviously been at the centre of this, but it's not just about him. Here's what he has to say about Coutts Bank.
3 times I've now written to the CEO of Coutts, Peter Flavel. Yep, he's the boss of that NatWest subsidiary. He's the one whose Risk, Reputation and Wealth Committee has plunged the bank into perhaps its biggest crisis in 331 years. And you know what? After 3 times of writing, I've not yet even had an acknowledgement.
So the thing I want to say about Dame Alison Rose, apart from her typifying a total lack of ethical principles, is that she doesn't like Nigel Farage. Well, millions of people voted for what he stands for. So what she's saying, she doesn't like any of you.
So
she just doesn't like you.
You know what? So what? What's it got to do with her, whether you like somebody or not? You know, we had a story from 2021 that we dug up this week where it was fined. I think NatWest was fined £265 million because they had allowed a drug gang to deposit millions and millions of pounds in cash into accounts from various different parts of the country into NatWest branches. So they're not being that good at actually policing morality.
Banks have huge sin sheets, let's be honest. Now, instead of them all running diversity training schemes for their employees, which we hear about all the time, actually they need a 101 in moral basics, and all from everybody from CEO downwards needs to attend it.
That's what's so important, because they've got this ideological framework now. not being won over with the public, but EDI, equity and inclusion and diversity, as part of the programme. And they're using that. They haven't convinced the public.
Where does this equity word come from, by the way? Because I've only noticed that in the last couple of weeks. It used to be equality. Yeah. They now say equity.
Yeah, and ESG, and they're part of the criteria. There's actually currently there's thousands of people who've had their NatWest accounts audited.
Loads.
And we've seen many others, and it's this kind of really Maoist, again, worrying dynamic that if you say something that some people don't approve behind closed doors, you can have your life shut down. This has been such an important moment.
The funniest bit about all of this and the coverage of it is that all the lefties have been defending Coutts Bank,
of course.
which is the most privileged and exclusive bank in probably Britain.
But that's why I think it's really important that it's not just her, though, that Nigel's now saying the whole board, because we need to address the institutionalised culture that's happened, and we need to do that in each of the institutions.
Well, this is it, because they actually said that they still had lots of confidence in her, even though she had broken all sorts of rules and possibly broken the law. Unbelievable. I'm taking all my money out of any bank that wants to do that to me. I'm telling you that. Coming up in the next bit, it's me. And it's going to be something about the BBC, believe it or not, funnily enough. This is Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. I'm Mike Graham. It is, of course, Friday night, and this is the time we choose the biggest plank of this week. We've already had 4 really, really good nominations, and I'm happy to say that it's my turn now. And guess what? It's going to be the BBC. And not just because of Simon Jack, who was the business correspondent we've just been talking about, because he, amazingly, who used to be incredibly vociferous on Twitter, shall we say, has only tweeted twice in the last 5 days. The first tweet was when he said that he wanted to correct the headline on the Farage piece. And then the second one was his ludicrous apology, which reads like this: "The information on which we based our reporting on Nigel Farage and his bank accounts came from a trusted and senior source. However, the information turned out to be incomplete and inaccurate. Therefore, I would like to apologise to Mr. Farage." I mean, if it was incomplete and inaccurate, why did you publish it then? You know, what on earth were you thinking? But it gets worse, and I know we're going to talk later more about the climate and the way that the climate editor of the BBC has been caravanning around the world looking for really, really hot temperatures. My favourite one of the week, and they say sorry a lot, the BBC, is the World Cup one. I don't know if you've seen this, where after a game between Morocco and somebody else, I'm not even sure who, because the story wasn't about the actual football match, but there was a press conference at which the captain of the Moroccan team sat there next to some coach, I think it was the coach in Morocco, and somebody from BBC World Service said, a bloke, and this is why they're so caught up in their own wokery, he said, given that it's now illegal, or has been illegal for many years, to be gay in Morocco, are there any gay players in your team? And if so, how do they feel about that? And it was like, sorry? You know, one, if it's illegal, you're going to be arrested. So did he expect the woman who was the captain of the team to go, oh, yeah, the centre forward, she's gay. And also, I think the left back might be a little bit bi. I mean, what do you think they're going to do?
Also, none of your business.
Exactly, what's that going to do with football?
Yeah, but also,
why are you talking about
you're
sexuality
potentially
at
asking
football?
people to out themselves, which they don't want to do in the first place. But if they do, they might then be arrested when they get back to Morocco because it's illegal.
Awesome.
And it just shows you how out of touch these people are. And of course, when they said, the FIFA people said, oh, that's a bit of a political question, please just ask about football, he went in his best kind of Chiswick accent, it's not a political question. You know, because they are so now indoctrinated that they think because we believe this, everybody in the world should believe it.
Just think how righteous they would have felt if he'd have outed someone who'd have gone back to Morocco and been stoned to death, but at least he was free from the shackles of suppressed homophobia.
Yeah. Well, interesting you should say that. We've got the clip.
In Morocco, it's illegal to have a gay relationship. Do you have any gay players in your squad, and what's life like for them in Morocco?
Sorry, this is a very political question, so we'll just stick to questions related to football, please.
And of course, the other thing is that nobody went to Qatar with that idea, did they? I mean, you didn't see Gary Lineker going up to the Qataris and saying, oh, have you got any gay players? By any chance? You want to tell us about it? And how do they feel about living in a country where it's not legal to be a homosexual?
I'm really surprised because the BBC, I would have thought, were pretty sympathetic about hiding secrets.
You would have thought. But I mean, the number of apologies, I mean, you know, they're in a sorry state, is what we're saying here at Plank of the Week, because they keep apologising. They keep doing things and then saying, oh, we shouldn't have done that.
I fear they have more apologies coming.
I think there are more apologies coming. I mean, the BBC have been on this show probably more times than Harry and Meghan. They haven't won it as many times as Harry and Meghan, but they haven't been on it for a while. But anyway, that's my suggestion. Coming next, Will, you've got a good one for us.
Oh, a classic. So we have a trans... Woman? Should we just say trans? Trans woman?
Trans woman, yeah.
OK, I'm kind of old school. I like my women like my breakfast. I like eggs, not sausage.
Really? OK. Thanks for that.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So see if we leave that in.
In terms of, obviously, this individual, Anne Coombe, as they call themselves, went to a hotel spa in Sheffield called the Mercure Hotel.
Oh, yeah.
And then kicked off because they were given by one of the members of staff a key to the unisex changing room and bathrooms.
OK.
And felt...
I didn't know there was a unisex changing room.
Apparently there is. Apparently there's male, female and unisex.
OK.
So this individual kicked off, said that the staff needed training to be more sympathetic, sent out a very vociferous tweet about how awful this hotel was.
I think we can see that, because there is a vociferous tweet that's been doing the rounds. Julie Hartley-Brewer actually picked up on it and wrote a very funny tweet over it.
Sharon Davis was all over it, and she responded. And quite understandably, you know, it's kicking off. The thing, Mike, for me, is this person, again, seems to be pandering into the norm these days in terms of acceptability. I'm old school in terms of there are men, there are women, and there are those that choose to do whatever they want, but they don't impose their will on everybody else. And the thing
also,
that
if you've got a unisex changing room, it seems to me that solves the problem.
Absolutely,
Isn't that the whole point of having a unisex changing room?
Indeed, and the thing that irritates me the most is in fact, for women, the fact that they're being hijacked by these individuals and having to make these sacrifices to allow these individuals to come into their spaces, which are, you know, sacrosanct and private and not to be intruded on. And we're seeing more cases, not just here in the United Kingdom, there was one at a secondary school, but also in the United States, where women are being assaulted by these trans who are going in there.
This typifies exactly what's going on. So I think having a unisex changing room is actually the answer, because then anyone who's happy can use that. But that wasn't good enough for this trans woman, because they wanted to make their point in a female-only space.
Right.
And this is what we have to fight
And a very angry
against.
point as well.
A very angry point. And you know what? If I'd have been in that changing room with my 4-year-old daughter, I do not want people with penises in that changing area.
Right.
I
don't even need to have a 4-year-old daughter. I don't want it either. You know, the thing is, a lot of trans women aren't like this. I know a couple, and they say they never go into the women's changing room toilets because they don't want to make women... They think of themselves as being like women, they identify as women, and therefore they have a lot of empathy for women. And they said they'd never go into the women's changing rooms. That makes perfect sense. That makes sense to me. But there do seem to be this really vocal minority that just want to barge in.
Just with entitlement.
Because it's an important part of their own sense of acceptance. But it feels weird. And, you know, when you're in the changing rooms as a woman, you know, the nice thing is that feeling that you're relaxed and it's... You've got safety and dignity and privacy, and you don't want that disrupted and not knowing who's in there. I've actually had it once. I've had it once, and I found it felt very uncomfortable. And I went to go and find a family changing room. I'm the one that left.
You're changing your behaviour. This is like saying to a man, or the other way round, tell me you love me. It's not real love. Because you're having to make yourself accepted in whatever way you see fit. This is like trans women saying, you will accept me and you must say nothing because I want to feel accepted. It's the same thing.
But it's that kind of slight narcissistic bent that much of society now seems to have, where they all think that they deserve everything that can be got at, and you know they can't be told no for any reason at all. I'm not just talking about trans people, I'm talking about just everybody. You know, people think that they can walk into any place they want. Why should you have something I haven't got? You know, I don't want to work 5 days a week. I want to have a work-life balance. I don't want to have to go to an office. I want to work from home. But you know, it's all that. It's the same thing.
And as well as presenting herself as themselves as a victim, there's also this insistence on sensitivity training, so that everyone has to undergo this reprogramming, cultural reprogramming, to do as they insist. They haven't won the argument with the public. It's an assertion. It's quite aggressive and forthright, being dressed up under the auspices of victimhood, and then we all have to retrain and reword ourselves.
And let's not forget where it ends. It ends at Cootes Bank, you know, and it comes back full circle to that.
Yeah,
Wicks, remember when the Wicks...
Is everybody endorsing
he doesn't want any trans shopping at Wicks.
It also ends with the most vulnerable on hospital wards, where elderly women have to share wards with men, and there are more than 3,600 assaults in that guise every year. This is where it's encroaching on everything. Women need their own spaces, but also, going back to SADIQ Khan, men need their own spaces to have their banter and do that kind of thing. We need both.
Mate. But this is
there's a lot of threads running through it today.
I think I'm really hoping the time is going to come where everybody jumps off this bandwagon, stops tolerating this nonsense and gibberish, and just allows people to understand that, yes, maybe be more tolerant of those that want to identify as a tree or whatever. I don't care.
But don't grow my garden.
But don't grow my garden. But don't impose your will and feel that we all have to
I've got the solution
to
for
bend to it.
My local shopping centre, you go to the toilet there, it's always shut. You can never get into it. It's always closed. So you get desperate for a pee and you go, oh! Then I have to go in the hedge again.
That's it.
Anyway.
Unless they've identified as a hedge.
Well, indeed. Renee, what have you got for us?
OK, so again, talking about people imposing their will on us, we're going to go to the BBC climate editor.
Yes.
He was appointed in 2021, Justin Rowlatt.
Yes.
Who this week decided to fly a round trip of 1,800 miles to prove that it was very hot in Spain.
Yes. You went to Alicante, didn't he?
He did.
It wasn't as hot as he thought.
It's always hot in Spain at this time of year. I know, I go there all of the time.
Right.
So, but worse than that, he actually gave a broadcast from Spain where he basically said, this is the problem. Flying, using fossil fuels. If we don't stop doing this now and cut our use of fossil fuels, we are not even tackling the problem. And then he flew home to his 2.8 million North London home.
Yes,
it's always interesting that all these people come from North London. I come from North London. I'm a bit of an outlier. And, you know, I'm sick and tired again of these people talking their aggressive talk, but never walking it.
No.
So they're preaching
it
literally. He should have walked.
He should have. He probably drove it in his Bentley.
He should.
We've got a little clip of him, actually. I think he's in Alicante. Let's have a look.
Climate change is pushing temperatures up and making heat waves like this longer and more extreme.
He's got a nice tan, though.
He's got a nice tan. He's wearing quite a thick shirt there as well. And he was only sort of I think it was late 20s, early 30s in Alicante. And despite that, the BBC kept predicting that it was going to go up to like 38. But it never did. It's a real problem.
They quote this predicted figure, and then that figure's in your head. There was I think 48 degrees.
48 was going to be everywhere.
And the thing is, then 48 stuck in your head.
Yeah.
And it's deliberate.
And you hear people saying it.
It's
and
a
people
nudge.
repeat it, because people would say to me on the show, oh, but it's 48. And you go, no, it isn't.
And
they
it
said
never happens.
They said it might become 48 in a couple of days' time. And then when it doesn't, they don't say, oh, by the way, we never actually hit 48.
But worse than that, other people than those sitting around this table were phoning their travel agents in droves, seeing if they could cancel their holiday. That's the fear.
Now, you see, hang on, you say that, but that's because you read that. That's not actually happening. I don't know anyone that's cancelled their holiday.
No, but
if
apparently I spoke to someone who owns a travel agent and they were taking calls from people.
Well, I'm surprised
asking,
at that, because if you saw the queues at Dover, it didn't look like anybody wasn't going to work. 2.5 hours to get through passport control.
I do know someone who said, oh, we were going to book a summer holiday, but we can't because it's so hot everywhere. And at the time I said, have you looked at Turkey? Because they've had below average temperatures so far this year. But they didn't realise, they just believed all the hype. And unfortunately, for some people who trust all these sources... Because if they do still trust all these sources and they hear the big number and they think it's going to happen because they trust the weather report for some reason, then they are cancelling.
I mean, the Met Office has admitted in this country that they can't do a long-term weather forecast because they don't know what's going to happen. And yet, they know that climate change is going to destroy the planet. I mean, give me a small break. Yeah. Anyway, coming up, we're going to be talking about a Labour MP and also some bloke up in Scotland who can't ride a scooter. This is TalkTV. Welcome back to Plank of the Week. This is now coming near the end because we've almost got about 3/4 done, but we've got 3 more nominees to go, and I'm going to go to Alan Miller for the next one. And she hasn't been on it for a while, Alan. Who have you got?
She hasn't. We've got the deputy leader of the Labour Party, Angela Rayner.
Angela
Rayner, who, in her response to being asked about why Uxbridge and South Ruislip was won by the Conservatives when many people had assumed it would go to Labour, as a consequence, largely of the ultra-low emission zone, which Danny Beales, who was the Labour candidate, had said from the get-go. Everyone at the door was saying, you know, this was a big thing for ULEZ, this imposition. No one wants it. It's undemocratic. It's just a money grab from people. She then says, well, the thing is, this is coming to every city across Britain. And you're like, there we have it. This is the big plan, the big idea from Labour to impose more draconian, undemocratic, cash-grabbing positions. Right. No big ideas, no lots of new housing, not about industry, trade, commerce.
Just give us your money.
Suffocating, undemocratic impositions that no one wants.
They make out that it's something to do with cleaner air, but actually they're not giving you cleaner air. They just want you to pay to pollute the air, don't they? Well, if you believe that you do pollute the air.
Well, they say that it's killing people, but they're not that worried about it because otherwise they'd just stop cars. They just say, look, you're killing people, but can you pay us £12.50 to kill people?
Yeah, exactly right.
What about the air on the underground? You know, it's all the ridiculous inconsistencies in the whole thing.
So the last 4 decades, the air has got unbelievably better. Car technology's got much better. The basically have to call it what it is. It's a lie that both TfL and SADIQ has been coming out with. They've extrapolated from the actual report to say 4,000 deaths. It's absolutely not the case in London as a consequence of this. And the good thing about all of this is that the public are wise to this. They are not prepared to put up with it. People have been challenging and fighting back. We've now seen a number of things like Mark Harper, Department of Transport, stepped away from active travel and Liverpool Streets funding for LTNs. We've also now seen that the Conservative Party having a serious conversation and concerns around net zero. That needs to be done much more. There needs to be a public debate and discussion around this because this is about our living standards, it's about the future, it's about wealth for everyone and where we want to be.
Yeah.
Exactly right. And also, do you mind not charging us any more money? I mean, we're being taxed more than anybody that's been taxed in the history of the country since the Second World War.
I think
they keep finding new ways to get more money out of it.
I think Laura's made a really good point, which is about London Underground, which is that is Khan's domain.
Right.
And a friend of mine has bought from Amazon one of these pollution detectors and was out and about on the streets. Nothing was rating it anything of any kind of concern. As soon as he got on the underground, the thing went through the roof. Through the roof.
And also unintended consequences. So where I live, ULEZ is going to come down to a really annoying bit, which means I can't drive in the most direct, and by the way, rural routes to the M25 and the A3. I will have to go through a town.
So more mileage.
And more congestion, more particulates in the air in a town, more mileage to avoid it, because I can't afford to trade up my diesel.
But an awful lot of people are finding that they can't go to local shops because it's going to cost them, 12 quid a day or whatever it is it's going to be. And it's ridiculous what they're trying to do.
And he is doubling down. SADIQ, he's...
Well, I mean, they've already got adverts up saying it's coming in at the end of July or something like that, when there's still a judicial review which hasn't yet decided if it's even lawful.
But you know why they're doubling down? You've got to use a bit of imagination about where this is going.
What are you saying?
I am saying it's a form of incrementalism. It started with a congestion charge, then LES, then ULEZ, then widening ULEZ, then it's every town and city, and then it'll be, they've talked about it, a cost per mile that you drive.
Yeah.
They don't want you to have a car. They don't want you to go on holiday. They don't want you to have a car. I think a lot of people are feeling this sense now, like there's a net tightening. They just don't want you to travel. Like, we're going to be cattle in pens, stay in your little 15-minute town. And people aren't having it. This isn't how we want to live.
Yeah, but people aren't going to take it. Laura, you've got the next one.
Yeah, HUMZA useless. I mean, YOUSAF,
yes.
sorry. OK, so the reason I'm...
Auto-suggestion.
Yeah, do you see what I did there?
I did.
So the reason I'm putting him forward is because the Scottish National Party are considering proposals which would stop the people of Scotland from selling their homes unless they've got an EPC rating of C and above. So at certain trigger points, including a sale, you have to have an EPC rating.
What is that, EPC?
It's your Energy Performance Certificate.
Okay.
What it means, in effect, is that many thousands of Scottish people, if they want to sell their home, would have to get rid of their gas boiler and trade it for a heat pump. Now, heat pumps cost on average £10,000. So they're basically whacking another huge cost on people if they want to sell their own property. And the reason this really annoys me in his case is because he wants independence for the Scottish nation, but he doesn't want it for the Scottish people.
No.
I see this EPC rating really is a bit of an encroachment on property rights. It's your house. It should be up to you how you heat it.
Also, this is another invention, isn't it, of the government? There didn't we didn't have these things 10 years ago, did we?
I'd suggest it's precisely what EPC ratings were brought in for, because what you see with a lot of policies is incrementalism, like the ULEZ thing. You start off at one point and then you end up somewhere that originally would have been completely unthinkable. But think about the hate crime bill as well. This is one of the most controversial pieces of legislation Scotland's ever passed, which impinges on your freedom of speech even in your home. So the Scottish government wants to spread its tentacles into your home in terms of how you talk and how you heat your home.
Yes.
And it's too much to put this burden on people. You know what? When heat pumps are good, reliable and affordable, people will buy them.
Yeah. They might.
Yeah, exactly.
But will
like
they ever
electric
be?
cars, really.
A friend of mine put some heat pumps in and he said they were completely hopeless. Then he put another lot in and they were also hopeless.
Yeah.
And he spent an absolute fortune.
Wow.
And he told me during the cold winter up there, it was something like, 2 degrees outside the house and 6 degrees inside.
Yeah.
I mean,
It worked really well.
It just doesn't really work. But we have, of course, got a clip of HUMZA Useless. It's just should we do it? Yeah, play it again.
Please, Mike.
It's just the
Can
way
we do it in slow-mo
It's
as
the way
well?
he falls, isn't it? That sort of gets everybody because it's quite an unusual
It
method
needs
of.
Benny Hill music with it.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, do you know,
You should say mate. Coming off.
There he goes. Well, Chuck has done that in the past, and I've always dissuaded him from it because it sounds like we're making fun of it.
This is also really weird because the way people sell houses in the UK, they're sold at every different stage of repair or disrepair. So sometimes you buy a house that needs absolutely everything doing in it, and sometimes you buy a house that's pristine and has a heat pump and an EPC of A. What are they doing now? You can only sell a house in this condition. So what happens to all of the other houses? When an old person dies, over the road, a 99-year-old has just died to me. Someone's bought her house. It needs absolute gutting.
I bought a house in Wiltshire once, and it had this really weird boiler, which was heated with anthracite grains, which I'd never seen before. And I didn't know how to light it because the people that sold us the house never told us how to do it. And it took us about 2 weeks to figure it out because it kept lighting and going out. And then we had to find a place to buy the anthracite grains. I didn't know where you got those. I found some kind of builder's merchants. And it was quite an adventure. But, you can't impose this kind of stuff.
No. You only have to look at Germany as well to see that the citizens are not putting up with that. They're having a big pushback. And actually, Michael Gove has referenced both that and what's happened in Holland with the Dutch farmers to say that there's this popular challenge to these impositions. So I am pleased with the fact that the idea that the public will have a dose of common sense and push back, which is why also Michael Gove's made the point about housing and the whole net zero situation, having to redress it. I think we should have more of that.
He's also going to Greece this holidays, Michael Gove. He said that the other day.
Not scared.
He's not frightened.
No.
He's a brave man. There could be some fires. Coming up next, though, you're not going to believe what's gone woke. You just are not going to believe it. And it might even win Plank of the Week. Welcome back to the final furlong of Plank of the Week, of course, and there's lots going on. We've got some tremendous nominations, and I've got the last one here, which you guys are not going to believe, because it's the 85th anniversary this very week of the Beano.
I used to get the Beano.
You used to love the Beano.
Loads of people
loved
used
the
to get the
Beano.
Beano.
Yeah.
They used to love it, but I'm afraid, you remember what happened to Roald Dahl's books?
No.
The same mob have gone in
No.
to the publishers in Dundee, and Inclusive Minds is the name of the organisation. They've gone in there to vet and shape the new Beano for a new era, I'm afraid, and they're going to embed authenticity in the comic, right? So what have they done? They've brought some new kids into the Bash Street Kids. They've brought 5 new pupils, Harsha, Mandy, Khadija, Mahira, and Stevie Star. And they've also rebranded Fatty and Spotty. You can't call him Fatty. He's now
Spotty.
called Freddie. He's called Freddie, and Spotty is now called Scotty.
Right.
Although, you have to say, sorry about this, this is a real bugbear for me, this. Fatty's still fat, because what they don't want to do is shame anybody who's fat. No. So you can still be fat, because everybody's a different shape. But you can't call them fatty, because that would be wrong. Right?
And it will do nothing for the BMI of children around the nation either. I mean, how absolutely ridiculous is that? I used to love Beano. That was an absolute
Well, let's have a look at
travesty.
Fatty and Spotty before they got tampered with by the wokists. Have a look.
Fatty Brown, with an appetite for life, not just food. He was born on Christmas Day. James Cameron, a.k.a. Spotty. This short, scrappy Scotsman has 976 spots and resists any attempt to remove them.
Do you know, my daughter would laugh herself silly at that.
I know.
It would just be funny to her.
Yeah.
Because to kids, if you say spot or bum or something like that, they fall on the floor laughing. That's what they want.
Absolutely. You should see my kids after they came out of the women's changing rooms in Turkey when they were about sort of 7 and 5. because there had been a load of Russian women in there walking around naked. I've never seen anything like it. They came out with eyes like this.
But the point about the laughing is good, because the thing is, these sorts of like totalitarian sensitivity reading dullards really do want the world to be joyless. That's what they want.
They do.
Want it joyless.
Well, the person responsible is a guy called Mike Sterling, creative director of the comic, right? Now, he said, when we make a new character, the inclusive minds connect us with an ambassador who advises us.
What?
It's a comic. What the hell is wrong with him, right? So when they look at the Bash Street Kids now, they say 9 were boys, 1 was a girl, all of them were white, and so we decided to change that. So they've now got Mandy, who's a nervous girl who suffers from anxiety because she's got mental health problems. There's a hijab-wearing Khadija Rad, who's a talented artist. There's Ruby, a ginger-haired scientist who uses a wheelchair, and Jemima Jones, a junior ghost hunter who's black.
You know, none of this surprises me, because propaganda's always a group. It's always a group effort. Edward Hunter, who coined the term brainwashing, commented that propaganda in those communist and authoritarian countries is always a group effort. It was part of the psychological effect. And you just have to understand it's happening here now too.
Do you know what's even worse than all of the things I've already said?
What, that they've got a ginger?
They've changed the teachers. Yeah, I know. They've changed the teachers. You know, the teachers were always running around with a cane trying to wallop Spotty and Fatty.
Now they've got cake.
You know, and they've got cake, and they've got no wooden cake for them. They've changed the teachers, right? So instead of
but in some ways,
instead of portraying them as like evil, horrible creatures, they're now portrayed as sympathetic and nurturing.
Oh God!
But you see, in some ways, the terrifying thing is it is authentic, even though I hate the use of that word authentic because it's thoroughly contrived and created, but it's authentic in the sense that that's what we've been doing with education and our culture. So it's actually a reflection of the way that we've been imposing these new ideas and these new cultural norms without actually having that debate in
They just need to stop. Stop doing it. Just stop wokeism. That's what I'm going to say. Well, look, we're at the end of the show, so I'm going to have to advise you that it's now the time for me to choose the winner. I don't think there can be any other winner. It just has to be Dame Alison Rose, doesn't it? So, Laura Dodsworth, you get it this time. The plank goes to the former CEO of NatWest Banking Group. This time next week, there might be a whole load of them who have left the building. But she ain't coming back anytime soon. Good luck with that. You can give your debit card back at the end of the show as well. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Renee Hoenderkamp. Will, of course, Geddes. Laura Dodsworth, whose new book is out. What's it called?
Free Your Mind.
Free Your Mind. There you go. Allan Miller as well. Coming up next, there's a new show. It's presented by some bloke called Mike Graham. You won't want to miss it. It's called The World According to Mike Graham. We'll see you next time.